Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the podcast app tutorial on Velocity 360. In the last video, we integrated the theme, the mobile theme, and carved up the HTML into a handful of components. And in this video, we're going to organize those components into their container and presentational respective categories. And then we will get ready to make a request to our search API and start downloading some podcasts. So let's get into it. So here's where we left off in the last video, and my server is still running, so everything is still up and running. We have our four components right here, but we sort of threw them all into one directory, which really is not best practice. So let's go ahead and create some organization behind these. So in our components directory, we're going to create 3 subdirectories. We're going to create a containers, we're going to create a presentation, and we're going to create a layout directory. And in each one, we're going to create an index file. Okay, great. So now the featured component where we've been laying everything out really should be in the layout directory. So in here, I'm going to create a featured component. Or better yet, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we just, rather than recreating things, let's go ahead and literally move the files around. So the featured goes in the layout, the nav goes in the presentation, as does the footer, podcast goes in the containers. Okay, that's pretty much it. Of course, that's going to break all of our file path references, so that's not good. So let's go ahead and take care of this right now. So inside the layout index file, let's export that, and then inside the index file in the presentation, we export that, and then inside the containers, we export that. Now the layout, the featured layout, is where they all sort of come together, so these are going to break. So let's go ahead and get the proper file path references. And the footer and the nav come from the same directory, so we're good with that. And then this comes from the containers. Okay. Now the app.js, the featured now comes from the layout directory of the components. And the index here is no longer valid. Alright, so we just moved a bunch of stuff around. Check in on Webpack, do a rebuild on Webpack. Okay, so I'm missing the featured. We got components layout, cannot resolve featured, so let's see here. Got that. So I forgot the second period right here. Okay, let's try that. Okay, open the browser, set it to the mobile UI, and that's it. Everything's back in shape, but the organization is much better now. Basically, we're preparing the organization for Redux because not all containers, not all components are created equal. We want to certain components have greater responsibilities than others, and we want to be clear about that. Now, one thing I'm going to do right now, without having you boring you with the details, is I'm going to fix all these indents. This is not a good thing to let continue. So these indents are all inconsistent. Like for example, they should be underneath the return and whatnot. I was just sort of hastily going through it. So here I'm using tabs, but then here we're using spaces. That's all very sloppy. So before I get any further, I'm going to fix all these indents, and then we should resume the building the app with a much more clean syntax and whatnot. So I'm going to pause the video right here and take care of that. You should do the same. Don't be sloppy with the indents. And when we're done, the indents should be all lined up. Okay, so we're back, and I updated the indents on the footer and the featured, but I did not do the nav because I want to do this together. The reason being is I want to remove a lot of these nav items, so I want to leave these 4 items behind. So let's go ahead and get this out of the way, get that out of the way. Okay, so then let's see how that looks here. Okay, good. So we only have a few menu items now. It's not quite as many. Okay, good. Now let's fix the indents on this guy. So let's do... Okay. This may seem like a trivial thing, but it's actually quite important because if the indents are all inconsistent, then it becomes very difficult to debug, and that's not good. Okay, great. So now our nav component is also set up consistently with the indents. So, yeah, that looks good. All right. Great. So now let's see here. So what we want is a logo here. These are going to be individual podcasts. And then we want to set up the search. So let's add a search bar over here such that every time the user types something in, or maybe down here, maybe that's easier to do. So when the user types in a search term here and presses enter, it'll run the search from our backend and then come back here with the results. And then the user will be able to play audio based on that. So let's find a good search bar from the index, the theme index. Okay, I think this will look pretty good. So let's grab this right here from the contact page of the index. So we find the contact HTML. And it starts at form inputs. Let's grab the entire form inputs. Excuse me, put that in our nav. Let's try right here. And let's get rid of everything but one input. And then just like before, we got to change all the classes to class names. And be careful right here, the input tag was not closed. So you have to watch out for that. And then let's see if that built. Okay, I don't see it, so that means it probably crashed. It did not. All right. Let's try it inside the menu navigation instead. Right there. Let's see how that looks. This isn't going to look good. So let's take it out of here. Let's take it out of the menu entirely. And let's put it inside the featured. Right here. Let's see how that looks. Much better. And let's remove the name label. Let's get rid of this ID. And let's put a placeholder called search. Okay, we're going to get rid of this button because it's just taking up real estate. It's one of those things about mobile UI you have to be considerate of, is that you don't have as much room, so you have to really optimize your space where you can. So I'm going to leave it like that for now. Not really sure why there's that space above, but we can just leave it alone. And then on top here is where the audio player is going to actually go. So we'll put that over here. So I think that'll be a pretty good, easy to understand UI for the user. So sounds good. Okay, great. So now let's get this lined up as well. Okay, good. So now to maintain best practice, we should have separate this as its own component, also called search, and that's going to be a view component. So let's go ahead and set that up in our components. Presentation component, excuse me. And for now, we're going to run this as a stateless functional component, and that may change later, but for now this should do. Okay, so then we want to import the search component and replace what we had originally with the search component. And if we run the server, whoops. Okay, good. So everything is looking the same as before. All right. So let's see here. This is going to be the audio player. You see where it says shop right here? That's going to be this right here. So let's see. Let's call that let's call it player. Playlist. How's that? Okay, and the reason I'm making it a container is because it's going to have to know what is the currently selected playlist from this menu right here. So when the user selects one of these, that's going to have to go to the Redux store, which will then tell this guy who it was selected, who selected it, or which playlist was selected, excuse me, which podcast, and then it will know what tracks to load. So that's why I'm making this a container component. And then here, let's set it up. Okay, let's see. And just so we know we're looking at the right thing, let's change that to playlist. Let's import it. And let's re-render. Check Webpack, make sure nothing crashed. Very good. Alrighty, so things are starting to take shape here. So now, let's see. I am going to do one more thing. I'm going to take this search component and I'm going to put it inside the playlist container. So remember, in React you can only render one div at a time. So I have to wrap the whole thing inside one div like that. Otherwise it'll crash. So then when I reload, it might have crashed anyway. So let's see. Playlist. Yep. Forgot to close it. Okay. Okay, so I see it twice because I left the one behind here, right there, which I did on purpose just to make sure that it was showing up right. So now we can get rid of that. And reload. Very nice. Okay, so now our component structure is well organized and set up properly for the data to be received from the backend, from the iTunes Search API, and then we can use that to prepare a playlist and then run the music through up here. So in the next video, we're going to make an API request to our backend by entering the term in here, and then parse the data, and then we're going to set up the music player, which will be in probably the video after that, to where this will load at first a static array of it's not really music, a podcast, so the audio player, the MP3 player, and then that'll show up here, and then we will use that to load the tracks. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for watching.